Dr. Ethan Cross sat alone beside a campfire on Velmora 3, watching flames dance against the darkness of an alien forest and trying not to think about how completely isolated he was. 3 weeks into a solo mapping expedition, cataloging native flora and fauna, collecting atmospheric data, documenting ecosystems for the Colonial Survey database. It was lonely work, which was exactly why Ethan preferred it to crowded research stations full of colleagues who wanted to discuss findings before he'd properly analyze them. Tonight he'd made camp in a forest clearing, his equipment humming quietly in the background while he heated pre-packaged rations over the fire. His shelter, a basic dome that would protect him from weather but not much else, sat at the clearing's edge. The local sun had set 2 hours ago, and Velmora 3 two small moons provided minimal light beyond his campfire's glow. Ethan was thinking about nothing in particular, enjoying the kind of peaceful isolation that fieldwork provided, when she appeared at the very edge of his firelight. One moment the darkness was empty. The next, she was there, a figure emerging from shadows so suddenly that Ethan's hand went instinctively to the plasma cutter he kept clipped to his belt for emergencies. She was Valkyrie, one of the indigenous species the Colonial Survey had warned about extensively in their briefing materials. Ethan had never seen one up close. The briefings had included images, poor quality, captured from distance by survey drones, but they hadn't conveyed the presence. She was roughly humanoid in shape, but distinctively alien in detail. Skin so pale it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, long, elegant ears that swiveled to track sounds, eyes that caught the firelight and reflected it back with an unsettling red glow. And teeth, pronounced canine teeth visible even when her mouth was closed, giving her species the nickname that had stuck among survey crews: vampire aliens. The briefings had been explicit. Valkyrie were dangerous, potentially hostile, aggressive hunters who avoided human settlements but had attacked isolated individuals on multiple occasions. Encounters should be avoided. Contact should be reported immediately. Lone researchers should never engage. Ethan's training said run or call for emergency evacuation, but she stood at the very edge of his firelight, not approaching but not fleeing either. Her long ears were forward, attention, maybe, or assessment, and when she spoke, her voice was clear, the human standard heavily accented but comprehensible. "Do not fear. I mean no harm to you. I only wish to speak with you, human, if you will permit." Ethan's hand remained on the plasma cutter, but he didn't draw it. His training screamed at him to retreat, but something about her posture, the way she stood carefully at the fire's edge, asking permission rather than attacking, made him override every protocol he'd been taught. "Speak," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm listening." She stepped closer, still cautious, still maintaining distance that respected his obvious nervousness. In the firelight, Ethan could see details the briefing hollows hadn't captured. Her clothes were woven fabric of sophisticated construction, not the animal hides the briefings had suggested primitive aliens would wear. Her eyes held intelligence that contradicted the aggressive hunter classification. And her teeth, the famous vampire fangs, were visible when she spoke but less dramatic than the briefings had suggested, more like pronounced canines than horror movie weapons. "My name is Lissa," she said. I do not know your word. One who speaks for my people to others. Diplomat," Ethan supplied. "Ambassador, maybe, someone who represents their people in formal communication." "Yes, diplomat, that is my role." Her long ears performed a complex movement. "I speak for Valkyrie to humans, or I wish to. But humans do not listen. They see us, and they run or they shoot. Your ships arrive, your survey teams mark our world, and you call us vampire aliens like we are monsters from your cultural mythology." Her ears flattened, anger, Ethan thought, or deep frustration. "I have been watching your camps for weeks, waiting for one human alone, one who might listen instead of fleeing. You are that human, perhaps. Will you hear what I must tell you?" Ethan's scientific training wrestled with his survival instincts. Protocol said report this immediately, request evacuation, do not engage. But his curiosity, the thing that had made him a xenobiologist in the first place, won. "I'll listen, but I'm keeping my distance, and if you make any threatening moves, I'm calling for extraction." "That is fair," Lissa agreed. "May I sit?" "There," She gestured to the opposite side of the fire, where you can see me clearly and I remain far from you. Ethan nodded. Lissa sat, moving with grace that reminded him of predators but also of dancers, controlled, precise, economical. She kept her hands visible, her posture open, her movements slow and deliberate. "Your briefings about my people," she began. "They are wrong. Not entirely false, but wrong in important ways that have made your kind fear us when you should be speaking with us. The Colonial Survey classified Valkyrie as potentially hostile based on several incidents," Ethan said, his scientific objectivity reasserting itself. "Attacks on survey crews, destroyed equipment, injuries requiring evacuation. Those aren't fabrications. No, they are not fabrications, but they are not unprovoked aggression either." Lissa's ears remained flat, that frustration again. "We do not attack humans for sport or territory. We defend ourselves when your people intrude on sacred sites they were explicitly warned to avoid. When your machines damage ancient groves we have protected for generations. When your surveys treat our world as uninhabited territory to be catalogued and claimed." She touched her teeth, the pronounced canines that had given her species their nickname. "These, you call us vampires because we have fangs, but we do not drink blood of thinking beings. We are hunters, yes. We eat prey animals, as your people do. Our physiology requires certain nutrients our prey provides. But your cultural stories about creatures that feed on people have made you see us as monsters before you ever met us. We are not what your mythology imagines." Lissa leaned forward slightly, firelight catching those reflective eyes. "The attacks your briefings mention, I know each one. I have studied them because I knew they would be used to justify treating us as threats rather than people. In every case, humans trespassed on clearly marked sacred sites or damaged ecosystems we explicitly warned your first survey crews were vital to our survival, or set up camps in territories we asked you to avoid. In every case, we issued warnings first, left stone markers, sent messengers your people killed or drove away. Only when warnings were ignored did we defend our lands, and even then, we did not kill. We drove intruders away, yes, aggressively when necessary, but no human has died at Valkyrie hands on this world." She paused, and Ethan heard desperation beneath the controlled diplomat's voice. "Your colonial survey is preparing to designate Velmora 3 as suitable for full colonization. Uninhabited except for hostile primitive aliens who can be relocated or contained. That designation will bring thousands of your people, will establish permanent settlements, will transform our world according to human needs. And my people will have no voice in that decision because humans will not sit and listen to vampire aliens explain that we are people, not monsters, that this is our home, not yours to claim." Ethan sat in silence, processing information that contradicted everything his briefings had told him. His training said the Valkyrie were manipulating him, telling lies to prevent human colonization. But his scientific instincts, the ones that had made him good at fieldwork, were pinging alerts that Lissa's story fit the data better than the official narrative. "The attacks," he said slowly. "The survey crews reported unprovoked aggression, random hostility from primitive aliens. Because acknowledging provocation would mean admitting they ignored warnings and trespassed where they were explicitly told not to go. Easier to report hostile natives than we violated clearly stated boundaries and were forcibly removed for refusing to respect indigenous claims." Lissa's ears flattened completely. "I do not expect you to believe me without evidence. I am alien, my people are strangers to you, and I know how your fear of what you call vampires makes every word I say suspect. But I ask only that you verify. Your equipment can access survey databases, yes. Look at the locations of every reported attack. Cross-reference with the markers we placed. Your imaging satellites have recorded them, though your analysts dismiss them as natural rock formations. Look at the timeline of warnings issued by my people before each incident. Look at the fact that not one human died despite your briefings claiming we are deadly predators who attack on sight." She stood slowly, movement still careful and deliberate. "I cannot force humans to acknowledge us as sentient people worthy of consideration. I cannot make your colonial authorities care that this is our home first. But I can ask one human, one who did not run or shoot immediately, who sits and listens even though his training says he should not, to carry a message back. Tell your superiors that the Velkhari wish to negotiate, that we understand you want to establish presence on our world, but we wish to be part of that conversation, not eliminated as inconvenient obstacles. Tell them we are not the monsters your cultural stories imagine. We are people defending our home. Ethan made a decision that would change his career trajectory completely. Stay, don't leave yet. He moved to his equipment pack, pulled out his survey tablet. I'll pull up the data right now. If what you're saying is true, I need to see the evidence before I report this encounter. And if I'm going to carry your message to people who won't want to hear it, I need to be certain I'm not being manipulated by someone who's very good at telling humans what they want to hear. Lissa's ears lifted in what might be surprised respect. You would verify before believing, even though it means inviting vampire alien to remain at your camp while you work. I'm a scientist. I verify everything before believing it, especially things that contradict what I thought I knew. Ethan gestured to the opposite side of his equipment. Come here, help me cross-reference these locations. If you're lying to me, the data will show it. If you're telling the truth, the data will show that too. Over the next hours, they worked together. Ethan pulled up satellite imagery showing stone markers around specific sites, formations that survey analysts had noted but dismissed as natural rather than constructed. Timeline analysis showing multiple attempts at communication before each unprovoked attack. Medical reports from injured survey members showing injuries consistent with being driven away rather than hunted, non-lethal, defensive, designed to make humans leave rather than kill them. Environmental data showing that every contested location had ecological significance the surveys had noted but dismissed as unimportant. By the time Velmora 3 suns began lightening the eastern horizon, Ethan had constructed a very different narrative than the one his briefings had provided. Not monsters attacking randomly, but people defending their territory after repeated warnings. Not primitive aliens, but sophisticated civilization that humans had simply failed to recognize as such because assumptions about vampire aliens had prevented anyone from looking closely enough. I'll carry your message, Ethan said as dawn light began competing with his dying campfire. I'll include all of this data in my report. I can't guarantee my superiors will listen. There are political and economic pressures that make acknowledging sentient natives extremely inconvenient. But I'll present the evidence and advocate for formal negotiations with Velkhari representatives before any colonization decisions are finalized. Lissa's ears performed that complex movement again, gratitude, Ethan thought, or perhaps hope that she'd been carrying alone for too long. That is more than I expected when I approached your fire last night. Thank you, Ethan Cross, for listening instead of fearing, for verifying instead of assuming, for seeing my people as people rather than accepting the monster story your culture imposed on us. She moved to leave, then paused at the clearing's edge. The campfire, that is human tradition, yes. Light against darkness, warmth against cold, place of safety and contemplation. Yes, we have similar tradition. Fire where we share stories, where we are most ourselves rather than most defended. Thank you for sharing your fire and listening to my story. Perhaps someday, your people and mine will share fires as equals, not as humans afraid of vampires, but as people learning to understand each other. Then she was gone, vanishing into the forest as suddenly as she'd appeared. Months later, Ethan's report created a diplomatic incident. The Colonial Survey initially tried to suppress his findings, but independent verification confirmed everything Lissa had told him. The vampire alien classification became sentient indigenous species with legitimate territorial claims. Full colonization plans were suspended pending formal negotiations. Ethan faced professional consequences. Some colleagues called him naive, suggested the Velkhari had manipulated him, questioned his objectivity. But he was also invited to serve as human liaison during formal negotiations with Velkhari representatives. Lissa was there, now officially recognized as diplomat rather than monster. Years later, when human-Velkhari relations had stabilized into wary cooperation, when Velmora 3 hosted limited human settlements established with Velkhari consent rather than despite Velkhari resistance, people still talked about the campfire encounter that had begun everything. In the glow of my campfire, Ethan said when asked about it. She appeared from darkness like every horror story about vampires I'd ever heard. But instead of attacking, she asked to speak. And her words, her simple request to be seen as people rather than monsters, to have a voice in decisions about their own world, challenged everything the briefings had told me. Sometimes truth arrives from darkness, delivered by someone you've been taught to fear, and the courage required is simply sitting still and listening instead of running. And Lissa, when she told the story to her own people and to humans learning about Valkyrie culture, emphasized a different lesson. He could have shot me, should have, according to his training. But he sat and listened and verified instead of accepting the comfortable story that made us monsters. That willingness to question assumptions, to look at evidence even when it complicated his mission, that is what made real communication possible. Fear is easy. Understanding